Hey guys, welcome back to the 429 podcast. I'm 2,
I'm 9.
And I'm 4.
and I actually remembered to start the podcast on time for once. And this is episode 23 of Techcast, ladies and gentlemen. So we have now made this episode 23. We have another great episode lined up with a bunch of interesting news stories. So without further ado, let's start it up. Let's start with this story I actually picked up today. It's actually really interesting because LG smartphones actually may cease to exist by 2022.
Oh, wow.
Right? And now you may be wondering, why this is happening, what could really be causing it and everything like that. So LG did an analysis of its business, and basically they actually lose money for every smartphone they're making, actually, believe it or not. Between all the licenses they have to get for Android, between all the hardware costs they have there, and between having like 0% of the market share because Android phones are leading, so Samsung Galaxies are leading that, and then you have Google Pixels that are leading it, and then you have Apple iPhones, which is the third big player in the smartphone market. The smartphone business is just not up LG's alley, and unfortunately by 2022 they will probably just be gone from the smartphone market itself. Now they still will make appliances like they do with their smart washers and dryers and fridges and all that other stuff, but
Of course.
smartphones are probably going out the door for LG. So it's the end of an era. This one hits a little close to home because my first couple cell phones were actually LGs. They weren't smartphones; they were like the slider phones and the touchscreen ones, right?
Yep.
But it's coming to an end of an era for LG. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this.
I never had an LG phone.
I did.
Well, that works.
Well, I mean, 4 had one, so I guess it means that they had some sort of range in terms of their customers. But I never had one. I always had a HTC, and I'm trying to think what the other one was some other brand. And then an iPhone. Never had an LG in that mix.
You
But
had
I feel
an HTC?
Yeah, I had an HTC back in the day. The ones that flipped, the ones that flipped and had the keyboard.
I
and
do know the
setup.
ones that
Yeah.
flip.
Yeah, those were the gays. That was back when a full set of a physical keyboard was a feature.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
I had something similar.
I
was rocking with an NV Touch from LG. Those
Yeah.
were the first
LG
touchscreen
Evo.
phones you could buy. It was kind of sick.
I had an LG Evo, the blue slider phone I had. So that was
I know that one. Yeah, that was a big
that was
one.
my first cell phone actually. So yeah.
You guys remember the Razer? What was it? I think it was called Razer. It was like the Verizon's exclusive phone.
Yep.
I think it
Yeah.
was called Razer. Yeah, that was the big ones at the time too, around that era. Yeah,
So-
but I feel like I could have gone to the LG. And it's kind of like that was kind of everyone's entry phone for a lot of people during that era. And I feel like for some people, this era, right? LG has exclusive features that kind of still make it stand out. Exclusively, their screens. I mean, they're the ones that give iPhones their screens.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
they definitely were the forefront of that. So it is, I even though I've never been an LG user, it is sad. It is an end of era, right? I always think of iPhones as not really the forerunners of technology as many people like to credit them to be, but more of like basically if they do it, it's kind of the standard kind of thing, right?
Yep.
But I always assumed LG and like Samsung, maybe in some regards, to be like the actual, I guess, forerunners.
Let's just think about this for a second, right? Let's think about the phone market 10 years ago, right? I mean, it used to be so funny because like everyone used to have their own phone. Like, some people had Blackberries, some people had, LG NV Touches.
You had
some
the
people
LG
Evos,
phones,
someone
you had the Blackberries, you had the Motorola Razors, you had the
Pantech
T-Mobile
stuff,
Sidekicks.
Like, there was so many different types of phones. It was like everyone might have had something different, and like now everyone's got the same 2 or 3 phones in their pocket. It's kind of sad.
You either got a Samsung Galaxy something, Google Pixel something, or an iPhone number something.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad. It's sad. But I mean, again, comes back to because they're at least for most people, it's pretty much they offer what they need, right?
Yep.
Right. iPhone, you may discount them for their lack of innovation per iteration, but they do work. I mean, like if you get an iPhone, you kind of know what you're getting into, and it's pretty much always going to supply a kind of satisfying product.
Yep.
Samsung, if you kind of want the more like a little more riskier on the innovation and stuff like that, you kind of go for a Samsung, right? And you got your Google Pixels lined up, right? Those are the guys that, like, you're in the Pixel lineup, the Google ecosystem. So they're even though it's only like 3 phones, they're still
I think the other issue that I think Ford is alluding to here is, right, back in the day, every cell phone worked with each other, right? You had, if it was just for calling and texting, that worked across all phones, right? Regardless of which one you had, right? Now that we gotten into the whole smartphone market where specific software is designed for a specific phone, it's really limiting, the market to just Android or iPhone. We saw Microsoft try to come out with the Windows Phone. We saw Amazon try to come out with their version of a cell phone, right? And they both flopped. And the main reason was because every software is designed around iPhone and Android. There's nothing that's designed around all these other phone systems, right? And that's your biggest thing. So until you have, a universal phone system that could be used again across all cell phones, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's maybe free and open source. You're probably not going to end up back to where we were back in the 90s, 2000s, and the early 2010s.
I mean, I think it's pretty controversial what I'm going to say, but I think the reason why we have only 3 phones in the ecosystem right now is because people have chosen it to be that way.
Yeah.
I honestly, as sad as it is to have the lack of choice, really, people have chosen these phones to be the top the 3 basically main only choices in the system right now.
Yep.
Because they just had features and it worked, right? A lot of the other LGs and the Razors we talked about back in the day, right? They had problems. They didn't work very well. Some of the apps that they had just didn't work very well with their phones. They had a lack of quality control with some of them. And more importantly, they had exclusive contracts with the big phone companies. One was only for Verizon, one was for only Sprint back in the day, or AT&T. That limited your usage right away. If you have that sort of thing, especially me, who was never contract kind of user. So, say what you say, even though I kind of hate we have this lack of iteration in that front, they kind of brought upon themselves by their approach.
You might be able to start seeing something like a more universal framework come out towards the future, right? Now you've got stacks like Flutter, you've got stacks like React Native, and if you were to have an app store specifically for React and React Native apps and Flutter apps and whatnot, right? All these apps that are perfectly cross-platform across multiple different operating systems, you might really be able to start seeing more versatility and options in the phone industry. But until you have a platform like that where all of your mainstream apps are going to be super compatible across every phone, regardless of the manufacturer or the operating system it runs, you'll probably still see kind of this hierarchy of Samsung and Apple at the top.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see how it goes, but maybe we'll turn this into a longer episode, right? Maybe we have our first longer episode idea for 2021.
Yeah, so let us know, guys. Let us know.
But let's keep going. We have a bunch of other news stories. So let's talk about AirPods for a second, right? AirPods Max, they've done a breakdown of the AirPods Max, and it makes makes Sony's and Bose's headphones look less technologically capable here. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? This is actually your story that you sent over to me.
Yeah, so I heard about this. This is a pretty interesting case. This is not one I want to say right away, prefacing that the case that the AirPod Max are superior product in that front, right? But they do have a really good insight for someone in the right to repair community, right? And just in a technological standpoint, how superior these are in terms of their manufacturing, right? These things are really built to be very modular, which is insane if you think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Compared to the the forerunners, I think the big heavy hitters in this headphones market, the Bose and the Sony's, right?
Yep.
Just seeing their hardware alone is just impressive. It's these things are alone, just seeing the parts alone, I can almost rebuild the AirPods Max in my head, just seeing their parts alone. While with the Sony's and the Bose, they're kind of I don't want to say Chinese or inferior products, but they definitely seem like they were built on a more less creative or quality parts. And it's the same to me, especially since these are AirPods that have the highest repair scores, iFix scored for them. I think a 5, I believe. So it's pretty insane. And I really like it. Of course, this says nothing about the actual sound, the actual uses of the product. But in that front alone, I think Apple scored big. Yeah. And hopefully more companies follow suit on their, manufacturing process. What do you think, Ford?
Dude, I'm kind of just, this is the first time really seeing this about these. But just scrolling through this article real quick, it does look like these are super modular. And I'm reading that these build qualities, it's supposedly far better than the other alternative headphones in the similar. I
Yep,
believe they're in
yep.
similar price brackets also. So
Yeah,
I mean,
it's insane. It's pretty good. I mean, it's kind of like it's almost like kind of seeing a engineer compared to like a high schooler trying to build something with
yeah.
Legos.
And
Right? It's like
I'm reading right here. My favorite part about this, and I know we've talked about this before with our right to repair videos, is iFixit has given the Air Max Pro or the Air Max, or the AirPods Max rather, a 6 out of 10 in terms of repairability, versus on its previous AirPods, it's refused to give them a single point, and
yeah.
it's give them all 0 out of 10. So I mean, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm honestly really happy about that. That means that one of the biggest issues with the AirPods, if people don't know, was the battery. You know, like no matter how great the battery is, eventually battery could, disintegrate. You have to change the battery. This means that with the new AirPod Maxes, that's actually a possibility for you to actually repair the batteries yourself. So that's beautiful for the right to repair community and stuff
Although
like that.
to be
Yeah.
completely honest, when it comes to like AirPods, I never really thought of those as something that's going to be repairable. I mean, they're so small and
Repairable,
so
right?
tiny.
Yep.
I mean, like it's just not something I ever really thought that I'd be able to fix myself or have a third party.
They're also relatively cheap enough to replace outright.
Yeah.
I would say.
I mean, for
Right,
150
compared to other
200
Apple
bucks,
products.
if they're gonna last me for anywhere from 3 or 4 years, just given any battery constraints and whatnot, I mean, personally, I think you're more likely to lose your AirPods before they break. So
That's a good point.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that's
Well, let's
actually
keep it going.
the right card.
Let's keep it going. So with other technological advancements, like how the AirPods Max is just way better than Sony's and Bose's headphones, right?
Yeah.
We have an interesting player coming up, right? And I want to keep an eye on this for the next year or two because I think it's
Yep.
going to be really big. But Brave Browser has actually taken the steps towards enabling a decentralized web.
oh
Yes.
yeah.
So
Yes.
just
So
a basic gist for all our listeners out there is that currently when you go to a website, you follow the HTTP or the HTTPS protocol, right? Which basically means that it's pulling website data from a central server and it's calling it a day, right?
hmm
And you just assume that the server is okay, right, with a certificate authority or whatnot, right? With this, it's actually more interesting because this allows a brand new protocol to come into play called IPFS.
Yep.
So IPFS basically allows for multiple nodes to store data. So not only does it need to only pull from one of the nodes to get your data, but each of the nodes at the same time can verify the data that's on the website to make sure that it's, correct data, not obscured, and that there's nothing malicious going on. So it's actually, if you want to think about it in, what technology uses today, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all these other cryptocurrencies are kind of like that today, where it's like a peer-to-peer network just verifying each of the transactions. It would be the same thing here with the Brave browser, going peer-to-peer, verifying the content on the website. This is actually a very interesting use case I think Brave is bringing out. We're very familiar with this type of technology due to some of the things we've done in the past. But 9, what are your thoughts? And then 4, I want to get your thoughts on this too from all the work you've done.
So in my case, I kind of worked with this closet exclusively, right, with the whole decentralized network and stuff like that. So, and I think 2 knows this as well. I'm actually a user of Brave for a while. I've been a user for Brave for almost a year, I think. I got recommended from one of our own mutual friends about it, and I actually really liked it. I like the goal that they're sending out. I'm trying to do my due diligence to step away from the centralized network and like Google and stuff like that. I think they're a little bit too data hungry, right? For my like.
Yeah, fun fact, 9 also uses DuckDuckGo as the default.
I use DuckDuckGo as my default browser. I'm taking small steps. Of course, I know DuckDuckGo's search quality queues are much less quality in terms of Google, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to take for my privacy. And Brave is one of the forefronts, I think, in my case, for browsers that are actually leading the charge in terms of privacy and stuff like that. These guys are really leading the charge. They have great connections in terms of features, in terms of privacy focus and stuff like that. And when I heard about this and the decentralized, heading towards a more decentralized web, right, that was all in. Like, this is perfect. They're even offering sign-ins now for you to be a node in their network. So, they're trying to get more users to get in. And, of course, if you're a node, that means you're also helping out other people who are trying to connect to it and thus offering a much better web in the long front. I'm even thinking about signing up for myself to help, pursue this decentralized dream of mine. But yeah, I'm really all in. I really like Brave. It's a really sleek looking browser alone, also both
Yep.
Mab and mobile. And I couldn't recommend enough for anyone who's looking for outside of the main. I think 3 browsers of like Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. What do you think for?
Yeah.
I am on board with this fully. I mean, you guys know my stance on internet privacy and censorship and whatnot, and I think that this hits all of the key points you need to hit. I mean, I'm reading this article right now, and they kind of cite the fact that hundreds of thousands of websites are blocked across the world in different countries, by different internet providers, right? And by having a decentralized web, anyone can access anything, and your governments can't stop you. So,
yeah.
And you're going back to the original, concept of the internet, which was free information for everyone.
Yes.
Yep. And I mean, the only real concern I think that there is with this is, obviously crime and stuff like terrorism and child abuse and whatnot. And, all of those items become a little bit harder to handle now. But, I mean, there's so much to gain in terms of freedom of information. And, I mean, I think that really it's...
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, just the freedom to information, it's something that, the internet was founded on. Right, that's how it started, and I think getting back to that would be great.
I think it's
all right.
cool.
Well, it's very cool. I'm very interested to see what happens, and I think from a technology standpoint, I can't wait to see what Brave comes up with. So I'll be keeping track of them very closely for the next couple months.
Yep.
But let's keep going, right?
I literally just downloaded Brave while we were talking.
Oh, perfect! I highly recommend it.
Look, so you probably heard it in my recording.
But let's keep it going, right? Let's move on to a fun story here. So for those of you who are on Reddit, you guys are hopefully very familiar with a subreddit called r/Wall Street Bets. These are basically just a bunch of what it used to be was a bunch of former hedge fund guys who just got together on this thing to just do some day trading and to make a quick buck really quick by doing options trades, which were calls or put calls, right?
Yep.
And what's interesting here is that one of their latest trades lately has been on GameStop. And basically from every economist and every, major talking head on TV who talks about all these different, stocks and everything like that, they're all like, no, GameStop's going to the shit. Like, it's going down. It's going to be zero. It's going to hit zero. GameStop's over. And these guys on all Wall Street Bets were like, we're not going to let that happen. And they spiked GameStop stock to its all-time high, and by all-time high I mean all-time high for all time, right? Not even just a yearly high of over $70, right? And just on Friday alone, it raised over 50%, right?
Nuts.
So it was so bad that I've actually never seen this happen for the years I've been keeping track of the market. It was spiking up so much that the major stock exchanges actually stopped allowing trades for GameStop until people were calming down. So this is a very interesting scene, a very interesting story, and honestly, it just shows you the power of the internet, because it's about 2 million people who are on the subreddit who got to really control GameStop's fate, and they're not stopping anytime soon, right? So it's interesting watching where they plan on going with this. But what are your guys' thoughts on this one?
Dude, this was so funny. When I first saw this, I was like, okay, hold up a second. What caused GameStop stock to go like this? And then, I mean, when you actually hear what happens with the short squeeze, like, it makes perfect sense. Yep. And, I mean, realistically, their stock being that high, I don't know where it's at right now, but it's probably doomsday for them now, because you probably have so many investors who had money invested and have just been waiting for an opportunity to dump it. And now's that time, and I think that I don't know. It's probably going to be so funny.
And I think you're going to see the OG Wall Street Bet guys are actually going to, short it and make put calls all the way down, right? Just to make double the money on the way back down. But it's very interesting to see what's going on here. But there's been my main fear here is that there's been a spike of about 1 million people on this community now, right?
Yeah.
That have just really come in, and they're just investing in what people are doing. So we're kind of in what's called the meme economy now, where it's kind of just like, hey, this is the new meme stock. Let's just dump all our money in and see what happens. Tesla was that stock at one point. I think they say Palantir was one at one point. GameStop's one. BlackBerry's another one they're coming up on now.
You know,
So it's very
it's
interesting.
kind of funny because I mean, when you have something like that happening, where you've got a million people on a subreddit that all can follow the same investment routines, I guess, right? It almost seems to me like you're now part of a freaking Ponzi scheme. You've got all these people dumping money,
That's what it sounds like.
and like
yeah.
eventually somebody is going to lose money. It's only a matter of time,
Pretty much, yeah.
There's always going to be someone holding the bag at the end. The question's going to be who,
right?
right?
I mean, it's not organized. It's not like it's an organized Ponzi scheme. I don't know if there's actually like laws being broken, but like the actual like just the way it's working and how everything turns out, it's like the same exact outcome of a Ponzi scheme. At least that's what it seems like to me.
You know, what's interesting is I was talking to Nine about this yesterday as well, right? There could potentially be some issues with laws being broken here, right? Because the SEC does have a social media policy where if you do recommend stocks or if you do are analyzing stocks or anything like that, you do need to disclose what your holdings are in that, in case it's what's it called? I forgot the exact word, conflict of interest,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so a lot of these people might be facing that issue on Reddit. But to Nine's point that he made yesterday as well, a lot of people think they're anonymous on Reddit, right?
And they
Which
are really.
we all know here, well, which we all know here is not.
To some extent, I think some of them are. I think some people are kind of get loose, kind of get carried away with the anonymity on the internet, right? But then they post like their identified information about them without even knowing. But I think
Right.
some people in the forefront of them trying to be anonymous will always really stay anonymous.
Oh, I
And they-
agree.
Yeah.
You know,
So-
I think if you really are worried about getting caught on Reddit for by the SEC for doing trading stuff, like those type of people, I don't think are going to get caught. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe people who
Sadly.
don't realize they're doing anything wrong are going to get caught. But like if you know what
Probably.
you're doing is not right, like it's hard to get caught on the internet. There's a reason why cybercrime laws are so severe, and it's because they don't catch enough people. So they need to make an example of people they do catch.
100%, yeah. Sadly, that's pretty much the case. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. Things can change.
Let's keep it going. We got a few more news stories. I got one small one and then two big ones coming up. So this one I just find ironic, right? So we were just talking about this actually, but Amazon is pushing for a milestone union vote to take place, but get this, in person,
Yeah.
right? I just find this ironic considering we just had a whole, presidential election that was done both by mail-in and in person.
Mhm.
And it's very funny to see how, Amazon's union board Amazon, who was in favor of mail-in voting, has now switched over to when it's their turn to be just full-blown in person, right? So I sense a little bit of hypocrisy here from Amazon, and it gets under my skin a little bit here, right? Because I don't like it when people choose one view for everyone else and then for themselves they're doing the complete opposite, right?
Mhm.
I would say that if this is your view, you should stick to it through and through. Be a man of your word, or in Amazon's case, be a company of your word, right?
Yep.
So, but I don't know. This is just something that was irking my skin. I just thought it was very interesting that they're doing this because we've seen a lot of union things try to take place within tech. We've seen Instacart lately with the whole union scandal that's going on with them right now. Uber and Lyft, which has had hundreds of union scandals, right? And now Amazon with their warehouse workers, right? So like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right to me. But what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're probably spot on, right? Like, I expect that when someone makes a stance on something that doesn't relate to them, that they kind of carry that stance over on
When
items
it
that
does relate to
directly
them.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, regardless of what it's about, I don't like hypocritical people. I think they're, really like. I mean, I think the word speaks for itself, right? So, I think that you should really try to apply your beliefs not only to other people but also yourself, and I mean that goes for everything, right? Not just their unionization vote.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's a little hypocritical, especially with when it comes to them now they have to change their stance suddenly, right? When this was only a couple months ago, you can't even say years ago. This was like literally a couple months ago from their previous opinion on this, and I kind of agree with that too. Like it kind of irks me the wrong way when people are so hypocritical, especially when it comes to stuff like this. But we'll see. Hopefully things change. I don't think so, but it really does show Amazon's true colors sometimes when it comes to this type of thing.
No, What do
Yeah.
you guys think about the unionization in general? Do you guys think that they should have labor unions in their warehouses, or?
You know what? It's a very American thing to have, these unions take place. We've seen it since the beginning of time, since America was founded, right?
Yep.
You have always had the unionization of workers and stuff like that. And Amazon, their warehouse workers are falling under, technically, if you think about it, that definition of a union, right? Now, unions are not always great. There are unions that we've seen, especially in our cities, right, that have gone rogue and have become like impossible to fire these people because of the union stuff and the union politics that goes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, right? I understand and feel for where these Amazon workers are coming from, and I do see how they can be, how they have and have become exploited from time to time, and so I think it makes sense from an Amazon's warehouse worker perspective to become unionized, right? Now, conversely, I've seen a lot of information come out there about software engineers within these tech companies trying to unionize, both within Google, Facebook, Amazon, etc. Right?
Yep.
That one doesn't make sense to me as much.
Yeah, I'm kind of on that.
That one does not make sense to me as much because they're not being exploited.
Mm-hmm.
If they're full-time employees and stuff like that. Consultants, maybe, but like if they're full-time employees, I don't see them becoming actually, exploited and anything of that like, right? So that one doesn't sit well with me, but
Yeah.
with the warehouse workers makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, similar consensus with two. I mean, pretty much point to point. That's pretty much the same. I would say consensus I'm reaching with. I think it really depends case by case when it comes to the necessary of these union workers. I think in some cases they really are needed, but I think in many cases we have seen the use of unions kind of just being used as a safeguard to prevent actual legitimate rules and I guess efficiency being used and kind of being carried away.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you. I have very mixed feelings about the whole unions, the union system, and I think you're right. In an industry, like with all these software engineers, I mean, realistically, you kind of make your own fate as an engineer like that, right? You're at a pretty high level job, I would say. It's a skilled requirement job. You need to have a certain set of skills to do it. There's not a lot of people, in the grand scheme of things, that could replace you in your job. And I mean, really, you're going to move up, move down, get paid, and all of this based off of the work you perform, right? How you perform. And I mean, up to this point, it's like we've seen major layoffs in terms of engineers, and engineers, especially at these big tech companies, they're definitely given good treatment. I mean, look at the offices, all the free food, all the this, the that. I mean, there's plenty of incentives for them, and I mean, you're really not stuck. You could work from home for any company in the world, and I mean, for the most part, you could pretty much just go get another job relatively quickly. So I don't really think that, like you said, I think it makes sense that there's really no reason for software engineers to be unionized. I think that would probably, in the long term, do more to stifle innovation than it would to protect software engineers. And
yeah,
I mean, for the Amazon distribution center employees, I think it makes more sense. But once again, there's a lot to take in, and I don't know enough on the topic to really make a definitive conclusion. But I think that comparing the two apples to apples, that one makes more sense to me than the other.
Yeah.
But sticking with some Amazon news, right? This is actually one of the major news stories that came out this week. Right, Amazon actually sent a formal letter to now President Joe Biden, offering to help with COVID-19 vaccine distributions.
Yep.
So we all know, we've already talked about this multiple times on the podcast. From a logistics and operations perspective, Amazon is impossible to beat.
Yep.
They are the king of the kings, right? They're the godfather of the logistics industry. It's basically impossible to overthrow Amazon unless you hack Amazon, right?
Yep.
Which we can talk about that at some other point. So this is interesting, right? How they sent a full letter to now President Joe Biden, and they were like, "Hey, let us help with getting the vaccination efforts, underway even further," right? It's great because now there are vaccine shortages happening all across the world. Not only the world, but within the United States as well. So it's great to see the private sector step up and be like offer their own logistic resources to come help here.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? I think this is definitely a major plus that's coming out.
I am. How do I say? I have mixed feelings about this, okay? Because
I understand where you're coming from.
On one hand, like you said, it's really great to see the private sector kind of reaching out more to try and help with this massive problem we have right now. But on the other hand, I mean, we've been distributing vaccines for like at least 6 weeks at this point, right? I mean, 6 weeks we've been distributing vaccines, and for 6 weeks we could have used the logistical help on delivering them properly and getting things, more timely. We've been doing testing and all this stuff, and all of this stuff needs to be distributed also. Like, the pandemic's been going on for 10 months at this point. Where has Amazon been the entire pandemic? Why all of a sudden now, 10 months into this, are they offering their help? Where were they 10 months ago?
To Amazon credit, right? I'm not saying Amazon's free of guilt, but to Amazon credit, it could be that they just didn't have the infrastructure for vaccine, because vaccine distribution is actually very different from just delivering, packages and stuff like that. You have to,
especially these vaccines where it has to stay below zero.
Yeah, so it could be they were getting the infrastructure right, that were correct, and everything just getting in place for them to set it up. And with everything now logistically ready, they offered the help. They didn't want to offer help when they know they weren't in a position to do so. To their credit, I'm not saying that's exactly the reason.
I understand. Yep.
But that could be one of the reasons. I mean, 10 months.
But the fourth point as well. They could have sent a letter to Congress, earlier on the pandemic, saying, "Hey, we have the logistical, know-how. Just fund us some money and provide us like some freezers, right? So fund us some money so we could get some freezers, sign the government contract for that real quick, and then they could have probably gotten this."
I don't think the money was a problem. We're talking about Amazon here. Like Amazon is I'm looking at more in terms of a time. Was the real culprit here. I think they just needed the time to set the infrastructure, the network all set ready.
That could be true too.
And 10 months, 10 months in the grand scheme of a pandemic is a long time, but 10 months in the grand scheme of anything, especially shifting architecture to handling vaccines, is kind of like, I say, right in the sweet spot of setting everything.
I mean, we've seen Amazon take on much bigger tasks in less amount of time. I mean, how long was their Whole Foods transition? They went from carrying items to carrying food in like months.
But they bought a company for that. You got to remember that too.
And I'm aware. I understand that, but I mean,
so that's very different. If they bought it, if anything, you could say they should have bought some sort of vaccine storage company to get themselves more in place. And you know what? I would totally agree with you with that. I mean, they have the money to do so. They definitely do, and they probably should have done that if they really wanted to help ahead of the time.
But yeah, it's an interesting one. But final story to wrap up, and this is a controversial one, actually, a very controversial one from a very unexpected source.
Mm-hmm.
Google is actually threatening to shut down its search engine in Australia.
Oh, okay.
I read this.
He just goes, "Oh, all right."
But
cool. It's basically all around Australia's push about some controversial bill that's designed to benefit some news media sources, right?
Yep.
To be fair, I will comment that I did not do enough thorough research to fully comment on, whether Google's in the right or in the wrong here. But just taking it off of face value and everything, it's a very interesting concept, right? Because, on one hand, you can have, a private company can do, whatever the hell they want to do, right? But on the other hand, it's like damn, like that's kind of worrying at the same time that, hey, like, Google's just gone from Australia all of a sudden. Yep. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this one?
I mean, I think for a lot of people that would be worrying, right? And you know what? To be case, I think it's our fault for letting Google be such an integral part of everyday life. I think we kind of set ourselves up for that fault, and I think everyone should share the blame for that aspect. But in the other case, there are alternate choices for Google. Like one we just talked about earlier, DuckDuckGo, I think is a great choice in terms of search engine. You also got Bing. I mean, they're not as good at Google, right? But maybe this is exactly the type of case that these alternatives need to really start stepping up to the game. DuckDuckGo could be like, Google, I heard, is leaving your country. Maybe we can come in and help you out. Maybe Australians start.
Well, I guess some more background, right? As I'm looking deeper into it, the bill basically states that if this law were to go into effect, Google and other media consumers, such as Facebook and other places, would actually have to pay these media companies for using and reading their articles and putting it on their websites, right? Or in Google's case, their search engine, right?
So,
And the Australian government has responded to Google as well, and they're Australian, so they're as tough as nails. And they were basically like, we do not respond to threats.
damn,
So
that's pretty noble. Though.
this is basic. So this basically may or may not pass. I don't know if the bill may or may not pass, right? But it's an interesting point to bring up because, you know, if Google and Facebook have to start paying, right, that's from a corporation perspective, that's money out their pocket, right? Whereas they're benefiting from the free media anyway right now. There are talks of Google and Facebook and other tech companies to enter into negotiations with these media companies and to actually figure out like a right payment system. But if not, it'll actually end up going into arbitration with Google actually being like, hell no, I'm pulling my services from Australia for now.
I was just reading this a little bit, and I don't really have, like I said, enough. This is kind of the first real time I've read this at all. But here's my understanding on this so far. It seems to me like Australia is trying to force Google to pay some type of, like, I don't know, payment to media sources and outlets of whom they display descriptions for their links on their search engine. Right? Let's just like
basically using their
You Google, like, oh, cute dogs, and an article for this new cute dog breed comes up in the search results, and Google displays, like, a short description, right? You know, they, like, add their little description. Google is supposedly now supposed to owe that company something for putting their stuff,
providing that
indexing
description,
it, right? Now, I don't really think that this is possible.
Fair?
Like, not only is it not fair for Google, but, like, just how, like, think about how that's even possible, right? Like, how would Google even pay them, right? Like, how does that even work? All Google does is just look, like, their whole search engine, it just crawls the internet to find stuff that matches what you've searched for. It's looking across public information and displaying it back to you, right? It's not taking credit for anything you've done. It's simply just displaying it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't think, I think it's an infeasible task because there's so many websites, it's impossible for Google to index all of them and link them back to a payment provider and, you know, yada, yada, yada. And there's so many Google searches. The scale of that problem is massive, and it would be ridiculous to implement. And, I mean, I just don't think Google is I don't see it as copyright infringement. I just don't see it as copyright infringement at all.
Yeah,
I mean, can you imagine, for one, if Google if Google search stopped? What type of website would those people even have? No one goes directly to your sites anymore, right? When was the last time you went directly to a site? No, you Google the articles you want and you click what comes up, right? No one would have any access to news anymore. It would be ridiculous. To me, that seems like a crazy initiative.
It is kind of weird that they're kind of enforcing Google just to pay up front for them using basically their services. It's kind of like I think it would start a really bad precedent.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, literally, search engine only point you to the information you want to find. It's presenting information to you. It's not claiming it. It's not trying to monetize it. It's just simply presenting information to you. It's a service that presents information.
It'd be pretty much like making Yellow Books pay for, like, when you, like, look up a restaurant or something like that.
It just seems asinine to me. Like I said, I don't know a lot about this at this point, but I mean, just the premise, it seems extremely flawed, and I don't think, once again, I think this is a case of the Australian government being too old to actually understand the internet.
Could be possible, honestly.
You know, it's an interesting dilemma, but it will be one that we will have to debate on another episode if the audience wants us to hear us debate more. But guys, I just want to say thank you for all listening.
Yep.
Thank you for hearing out all these stories. Hope you guys found this week just as interesting as previous weeks and previous episodes. We have a lot of interesting things planned for 2021, so please keep follow, subscribe, and just keep on tabs with everything we're doing.
At the 49 podcast on, like, every platform.
Yeah. So, but anyway, guys, I'm 2.
I'm 9.
And I'm 4, and we will see you in the next episode of Techcast. Have a great week.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Later.
Take care, guys.